This is the Starship vlog for Friday, December 14th, 2012. Smart goals and acceptance criteria. I'm Buck Field.
Following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
In the history of space exploration, that presentation of a future goal stands as perhaps the best of its kind. It has been suggested that this is because the statement was audacious, inspiring, and inclusive of everyone in the U.S. These observations are certainly true, but lots of audacious and emotionally inspiring goals that include the whole world are presented and they don't qualify. Why not? Well, most of these goals are for entertainment. They may be unrealistic or simply non-actionable for the foreseeable future, because although we may want to do something now, there's really no clearly identified path to accomplish these goals. Starships are generally considered in this category because of a logical fallacy that sounds much like this.
We are too naive to know what questions are going to be answered in the next 100 years. We don't even know which questions to ask in the next 100 years.
In a later episode, we will examine what makes that argument invalid. And if you have an opinion on that, drop us a line. Now, invalid doesn't mean that conclusion is factually wrong. It just means that the chain of reasoning to arrive at the conclusion has problems. If we want to reach the stars, we need to identify and focus on immediate, near-term objectives that move us toward revolutionary technologies of the future. Since we can't focus on everything at once, productive attention is guided by a reliable vision of success. Developing that vision must be done very carefully if we are going to have the best chances of success. Here's why. Early in a project, when we're just starting to plan, we have a huge amount of influence, and it doesn't really cost us anything. We can focus on a relativistic sublight vessel, robotic probes, a starship with faster-than-light warp drive, and switch back and forth between any of them pretty much for free. This brings up something we will talk about in a later episode. How important planning is. The thing about planning is that if we do it really well with lots of detail, we'll make mistakes. What's great about that is we didn't make them in the real world where they can cost tons of money, years of effort, and unfortunately sometimes they kill people. Fixing mistakes online and on paper saves so much time, money, and risk, it's not even funny. Changing from one project focus to another costs nothing until we've started investing resources that are only suitable for one or the other. And there's always some change costs. In episodes focusing on portfolio management and strategic alignment, we will address how to select the right kind of projects. If you're watching this as part of a PMI or other management education or certification prep, you probably are familiar with those terms. If not, and that sounds like jargon, don't worry. A portfolio is just like a shopping list for an organization. Instead of groceries we want to buy, a portfolio list is a list of projects we want to do. The point here is that in planning, switching anything is dirt cheap, but as our work proceeds, the costs of changing things increases. The further along we are in the project, the more work, time, and money it takes to change the results. Ironically, because it doesn't cost much, getting the vision and plans right is often overlooked or even treated with disdain. I once had a client hire me to rescue a failing software project which had been in development for a year and a half with no end in sight. On my first day, I told the directors that we should tell the software team we were going to work on a plan to bring this project in, and that while the top guys did that, everyone else was to wrap up whatever they needed by close of business Thursday and take a long weekend. We'd give them Friday off and free tickets to the first matinee of the new Star Trek movie opening that weekend. The directors hated this idea until I explained that we had two staff choices for the next Monday morning. We could deliver our plan to a hostile group who was going to be told Their past work was being trashed, yet again. Oh, and we were now going to jerk their chains in a new direction. Let's call that Audience 1. Then there's Audience 2. That's the team of software developers whose leaders tell employees the truth about problems everyone knows already. And not only do these bosses take responsibility to fix it and support the team, they provide fun and cool perks. What a great place to work! That's Audience 2. It seemed pretty clear to which audience we'd prefer to unveil the new plan. And it only cost a few $100s. That's a no-brainer. Sacrifices like this are also good for leaders. Often, by doing something we don't like, it paradoxically helps us better focus attention. Developing a smarter vision, a better scope statement, and more reliable initiation plans served everyone very well. Great visions like Kennedy's initiation of the Apollo program are reliable because they are built to conform to a type of acceptance criteria called SMART goal criteria. What are these? SMART stands for what good, effective goals should be: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. First, specific. Specific goals are clear. They communicate with precision the defining features of successful accomplishment. Those features are our criteria for accepting or making the claim that we've succeeded. For Apollo, an astronaut steps on the moon and comes home safely. Everyone knows exactly what to expect when the goal is achieved. In our Starship development discussions, we're going to focus on building a specific vision like that. M is for measurable, which for the moon mission is dead easy. If you've got an uninjured astronaut parading around with a bag of moon rocks, you've accomplished your goal. Measurable characteristics are concrete, and we should be able to assign real numerical metrics to each step on our way to successful completion. Development of a Starship vision of success is not complete until it enables everyone to effectively measure progress in this way. A stands for achievable, which means that the goal can be a stretch, but not impossible according to experts in critical areas. Achievable also implies necessary resources for the goal are available. Kennedy specifically addressed that issue like this.
I believe we possess all the resources and talents necessary, but the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals.
When I began looking at the challenges facing the Apollo program, I'd written that they were relatively well understood within the relevant math, science, and engineering disciplines, and that these challenges were regarded by those experts in those fields as doable. Jesus Diaz at the space blog on Gizmodo changed my mind on those ideas. He claimed nobody at NASA, including Chief Administrator James Webb, had any idea how to even begin scoping the project. Unfortunately, Webb had already admitted to Kennedy that he believed a moon landing probably could be done. Diaz offers wildly changing budgets in this early planning as pretty good evidence that calling their initial planning weak would be an understatement. Achievability of developing a Starship is probably the greatest near-term challenge to people endorsing that vision. Relativity prohibits faster than light, unless space-time can be altered in certain ways. And theoretical proposals to do that appear, I don't want to say impossible, but the options currently on the table appear extremely unreliable, and they don't follow guidelines for successful project delivery. I think this is mainly because the way revolutionary science and technology happen is so obscure that most people don't even know that field of study exists. Fortunately, I'm not coming at this from an engineering or physics background, or I'd certainly think the same thing. This is especially true when related to the state of the art for Apollo when it was initiated, or even what was developed to break the sound barrier. Faster than light development will take years of dedicated effort on topological models, algorithm theories, and developing new maths before we can even discuss technology. Developing warp drive on a schedule will involve highly specialized disciplines, starting with the history of scientific revolutions and their structure. Planning the work involves making sure we do what is most likely to produce the revolutionary knowledge we need. Good project management based on proven standards is critical for us to create reasonably trustworthy plans so we can keep our work aligned with what has produced revolutionary models and theories in the past. Finally, a number of very obscure math specialties in physics look like they must be integrated into this mix, and that's only what we need for planning a project to deliver a candidate for a workable theory. Specialists in each of these fields are naturally isolated from each other by long histories and their own methods and specialized vocabularies, or what project managers call lexicons. After all that, our first results are overwhelmingly unlikely to be much good. But on the bright side, like development of the light bulb, we will have learned some things that worked well, what didn't, and then we try again. That is how impossible technologies get built. Learning from failures and improving on our next try. Now, whenever we are tempted to think that this is dishearteningly negative, we should put ourselves in the position of an astronaut in the late 50s and early 60s. We are training 16 hours a day and working like demons preparing for a chance to go to the moon. We sit down with our wives and maybe kids at night. We turn on the TV and we see stuff like this. Then this, etc. In contrast to that, we have the chance to take advantage of everything that has been learned in 50 years from government programs like NASA, the Department of Defense, professional organizations like the Project Management Institute, and history and philosophy of science groups, as well as universities. In future episodes, we will explore how integration of specialist disciplines suggests faster-than-light technology research is worthwhile, even if the technological goal of faster-than-light really is unachievable. I believe it is possible if we can put the right pieces together, but we won't really know until we try, and in scientific fairness, visions of future Starship technology could be impossible. For now, we'll say that to endorse a Starship project, our initial steps should score better on achievability than the moon mission did. What Starships lack in obvious achievability, they more than make up for in our next SMART criteria, relevance. First, let's look at the relevance of the Apollo goal. The U.S. was locked in the Cold War with Russia, and as Jesus Diaz pointed out, the Kennedy administration was reeling from the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin's stunning orbit of the Earth accomplished what was well beyond U.S. capabilities at the time. Real pressure came when reconnaissance photos showed that the Russians were developing a massive new class of rockets for which the moon was the only likely target. Now, preventing a red moon became very relevant. Being the first to the moon would be great for the national mood in the U.S. Politicians supporting that goal and businesses involved from every state that would be working on it stood to benefit as well. In contrast, Starship research has an advantage over Apollo with the criterion of relevance, because developing faster-than-light capability requires solving problems in physics theory that work experimentally in the real world. The standard practice for the last 100 years in physics largely is focused on churning out increasingly super complex equations tweaked to match observations, and usually these have impossible to verify consequences. At warp drive research labs, that work doesn't even make it in the front door, because we're building something new, concrete, and functional to take people to the stars and back. We don't have time for mathematical fairy tales that are untestable. This would actually seem to have a plus when physicists have been coming forward for decades complaining that their theories are useless. My money would be on physicists and mathematicians all over the world would love to be shown a Starship like this or this and told, you're going to have the chance to help build this. That already meets the specific criterion. The last thing to mention here is that concrete, specific problems like that are usually what trigger revolutions in science. The final criteria for SMART goals is that they are timed, meaning that they have a deadline attached like this.
To achieving the goal before this decade is out.
The timing is crystal clear, by the end of the decade. It's somewhat poetic, but clearly it means before midnight on the evening of December 31st, 1969. As the saying goes, I love deadlines. I especially love the sound they make as they go whooshing by. When acceptance criteria of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed are met, we have a SMART goal. To learn more about acceptance criteria, visit PMI.org. Great vision statements present a SMART goal that is also inspiring, and these are called acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is one of the terms defined by the Project Management Institute to help projects succeed. This is a good point to dive into the lexicon of project management, but before we do, what is a lexicon? Lexicon is a fancy word for the unique terms or slang all specialist communities use. Doctors are especially great at using their lexicon for financial gain. They don't say, "Oh, I see your throat is irritated," probably because we wouldn't pay $100 just to hear what we'd just complained about. But when they say, "My clinical diagnosis is laryngitis," somehow it seems more worth it. Every area of human activity has unique terms needed to deal with their unique knowledge. To help humanity reach the stars, project teams need to understand SMART goals and other current terms because these are the foundation for research and development of the future. It's why we are now going into the lexicon. Acceptance criteria are defined by the Project Management Institute as the conditions that must be met before deliverables are accepted. The Mercury and Gemini programs were planned to continue until their acceptance criteria for completion were satisfied. Reliable stepping stones to develop Apollo-class processes, systems, and technology. To do everything we need to reach the stars and return safely, the same kind of strong, documented acceptance criteria must be developed for each step of the way, working backward from our vision of ultimate success, just as they did with Apollo. Let's go to Q&A.
Hey Buck, this is Greg Stevens. I blog over at gregstevens.name. I've seen you write a lot about the fact that there's a crisis in cosmology and physics, and I'm interested in this because I've actually thought the same thing. But I was wondering what your reasons are. What are some of the specific symptoms that you see that lead you to that conclusion? Thanks.
Hi Greg. Actually, I'm just relaying what pretty much everyone who has looked at this has concluded for many years. Different groups use different lexicons or vocabularies, and when I say crisis, I'm using the terminology of Thomas Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions a half a century ago. At one end are the least disruptive discoveries, which are new examples of well-defined phenomena that are exactly what researchers were trying to find, like a new variety of a beetle in the jungle or a new supercluster of galaxies. They have few surprising characteristics, and discovering and cataloging these is called normal science. We didn't know where or when they would be seen, but the new observations were generally expected to occur, and new kinds of beetles and superclusters simply add to what was already known. Toward the other end of the spectrum of anomalies are disruptive rule breakers, when observations violate basic rules that define how we categorize things. For example, how do you categorize an animal that has fur and gives milk like a mammal, but lays eggs and produces venom like a reptile? In that case, science and biology could not provide an answer, and specimens of the platypus were considered a hoax. In astronomy, rocks falling from the sky were regarded as the rantings of poorly educated peasants. The buildup of our physics crisis is harder to understand because much of it involves specialist maths and seems abstract. It is abstract compared to beetles and meteorites. For me, the most important indicator of a problem might have been when physicists decided to solve some problems with observations for light by declaring light to be both a particle and a wave. What's wrong with that is that it violates a fundamental rule of logic called the law of non-contradiction. Relativity has been considered an incomplete revolution since before the term paradigm shift was invented. After more than a century, not only haven't physicists resolved the problems of relativity, more conflicts and paradoxes have arisen. Observations of both very small particles and very large gravitational effects have been so frustrating that scientists have been willing to break some scientific rules of the game just to make any kind of progress. From a project management perspective, these are symptoms of what we call risk indicators, and the length of time this research approach has failed to resolve fundamental problems suggests it is bound to fail, no matter how much money, manpower, and machinery we throw at it, even if we did so for another 100 years. Noted actress, poet, and novelist Vanna Bonta asks, "What do problems with physics theory have to do with space not being real?" One of the things that makes the current model unlikely to be true, the current models about space and time, is that it requires us to assume that humans are able to sense fundamental dimensions of nature. Certainly the universe looks like it has space and time and forces, mass, other things that we observe, but it would be natural for us to assume that, just like it's natural for us to assume the sun goes around the earth, because it certainly looks that way. But it's very unlikely for the universe to correspond very well to humans, just simply on the fact of our relative size. We are incredibly small. We're smaller than a cricket in the bottom of the Amazon, and we wouldn't expect that cricket to know very much about how the jungle operates. Yet that cricket has more relative cognitive power to the size of the Amazon jungle than humans have to the universe. I hope that answers your question. If you have a question and would like it answered here, send us a video. Here are some events of interest to the Starship community. First is tomorrow's Philosophy of Science deadline. December 15th is the due date for abstracts to the 6th Munich-Sydney-Tilburg Conference on Models and Decisions. At this conference, experts will study and discuss the latest research on the capabilities and risks of cognitive models in science. This is important to planning revolutionary science because models are the foundation upon which all scientific understanding and activities are based. At the opposite end of the spectrum, starting December 15th and running through the 18th, is the Santiago Maker Fair, hosted by the Chilean National Museum of Natural History. At this event, inventors from across Latin America will meet to exchange ideas, show off their latest technology projects, and brainstorm new combinations that look fun and interesting. The innovation potential of these open-source collaborative events is recognized, but the future for creative talent that leaves traditional organizational methods in the dust, including the project management methods called Agile, is generally not. Being interested in starships, revolutionary tech is a big topic, and maker fairs are cutting-edge, open source, ultra-agile, a global phenomena that are producing potential game changers every day. The Starship vlog will be in Santiago to cover the event. Between the ivory towers of philosophy and the tool pushers in the basement, there always seems to be plenty of room for paper pushers like me. On December 19th, the National Academy's Division on Engineering and Physical Sciences Aeronautics and Space Engineering Board is holding a meeting on the topic of policy for space and technology. I make fun of these, but this is what I most wish I could attend: to lobby for the strategic vision of human interstellar flight and tactical support for the kinds of transdisciplinary research that would either help make starships happen or prove they're impossible. If you're attending, let us know and we'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Here's this week's Starship Pop Culture.